There's a saying that mano matram jagat, mano kalpitam jagat. The world is as the mind sees it and feels it. The world is as the mind thinks of it. So in our teaching, the mind has been very, very important. Westerners are recognizing now. Before we were thinking that mind and body are two separate things. Now they are really understanding that mind is very important. This thing has changed tremendously in 1990 when the two gentlemen, Salovey and Mayer. Salovey was the president of Yale University. He and Mayer described what is emotional intelligence. The ability to monitor one's own and others' feelings and emotions, to discriminate among them, and to use this information to guide one's thinking and actions. That means that you want to understand your own feelings and emotions. How you feeling? Emotion means that how you taking it. Are you getting angry? Are you sad? And then discriminate among them. And also others' feeling. Not only yourself, how other person is feeling. And then to use this information to deal with other person. In 1990, he described it. In 1997, he came up with the model that to develop emotional intelligence, you have these 4 stages. These stages are emotional perception. You perceive what emotions are happening. Emotional assimilation, emotional understanding, and emotional management. There are some scientific papers from India showing that these 4 qualities are very similar to Satikna Prajna that Lord Krishna taught to Arjuna. It's not exactly it, but they try to come very close to it. Dan Goleman wrote the book, bestseller book in 1994. He talked about emotional intelligence. He wrote that when you are very intelligent, you have high IQ, you're going to be successful in your college or in your studies. But when you go to work, you're not going to succeed unless you have emotional intelligence. Because our emotion guide us what to do. If we are not in charge of our own emotions, you're not going to be able to deal with others properly, and you will not be able to be successful. So this, the scenario goes like this. You get first in your class when you finish your medical school or college and you go to work. Suddenly within a year or 2, you could not get along with other people. You didn't know how to deal. So you never succeed really in your life. And this deal with mostly with your professional life. Our teaching go back to not only professional life, but in our daily life. Most of the teaching now being taught in the West is more related to professional life. So Dan Goleman, when he described emotional intelligence, he said that you have these 5 characteristics. You have to understand to say that you're emotionally competent. First is self-awareness. Self-awareness is described by Dan Goleman. Knowing one's internal states, preferences, resources, and intuitions. That means that when you understand what's happening in your mind, you're able to know your strengths and weaknesses. And then you will be able to do things confidently. And that's how you can succeed. They taught self-awareness to American Express financial advisors. They find out that the people who took the course, they were much happier, their clients were much happier, and they perform much better at work. Second is self-regulation. Self-regulation means that when you get angry, upset, how you go to handle that. There are a lot of science. I'll show you a little bit of science. So this teaches us how to handle the situation when you cannot control your emotions, motivations. People go to work, but they don't really like it. You know, in the United States, only 30% of the people like to go to work. 70% are going to work for the sake of making a living. Only 20% love the job. How you can create situation where you will be motivated so you love what you do. Then empathy. Empathy means you understand how other person is feeling. New science shows that there's a slight difference between empathy and compassion. Empathy means you understand the other's feeling. Compassion is that you understand others' feeling and you want to help them. So that's the difference between. When did this study on the brain, the center which records empathy is different than the center which records compassion. Social skills, when you put all these things together, you'll be able to deal with people who you work with, in your family, with your children, and you'll be able to succeed and you'll be happy. All of this movement had to do with describing what is mindfulness. Dr. Kabat-Zinn in 1979, he studied all of our Eastern tradition, including studying Gita with Swami Chimayananda, and then he studied Vipassana, and then he came off the program at University of Massachusetts, where he started teaching stress reduction. In teaching stress reduction, he created a program called Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction Program. It's an 8-week program that he would teach people to meditate for 2.5 hours a week. He teaches. And then when they go home, they have to at least practice 1 hour a day. And this goes on for 8 weeks, and there's 1 day of full retreat where you have to meditate all day. With this, a lot of scientific studies have come out in the last 30 years. There are about 1,000 scientific papers studying the benefits of mindfulness. This mindfulness is very similar to what Dan Goleman talked about, emotional intelligence, which is self-awareness. When you're aware of what's happening in yourself, you're mindful. So one step further, I spent last year studying a program they teach to Google employees. All the Google employees have a chance to do meditation and study a course called Search Inside Yourself. This Search Inside Yourself was created in Google by Mang. What he did was that he used mindfulness to teach emotional intelligence. This roadmap says that when you have emotional intelligence, you can perform better, you can be a better leader, and you can take better care of yourself. To do that, you have to understand science behind it, neuroscience, and you have to understand mindfulness. If you have these, you'll be able to build on the other qualities of emotional intelligence. The basis of this is shown by the studies of the brain. There's a new science called neuroplasticity. In the last 10 years or so, there's a lot of studies being done. Whatever you are planning, what you're doing, and what you're thinking will all change your brain. It can create new connections in the brain. That means that it used to believe that, 20, 30 years ago, that your brain cannot change. Now, the science shows that brain can change more in young children, but even in the older person. It can change and create new connections, new neural pathways. This is a picture of London. What does it do? What they did in London was that they studied the taxi drivers who has to learn the London map. And they have to take an exam. It takes them 2 to 3 years to pass the test before the GPS system came out. So they did the study, MRI study, on the taxi drivers and the bus drivers in London. They find out that in these people, their hippocampus become much more active. Hippocampus is the place where the neuroplasticity is most active. It shows that when you have a very stressful condition, the neuroplasticity does not take place. Actually, their studies show that in a person who is very stressful, the hippocampus shrinks. So now they know that hippocampus is the place where the neuroplasticity takes place. Another thing you'll be able to relate when I show the shlokas from the Gita about neuroscience of amygdala and prefrontal cortex. If you look at the brain, the red mark is where the amygdala is. Amygdala is the place, it's called the sentinel of the brain. That means that when you have a threatening situation, when you get really upset, angry, amygdala reacts. And when amygdala reacts, it can stop the pathway. Normally, when you have something threatening, which is not life-threatening, the path will go to the prefrontal cortex, which is the higher center. Amygdala is present in the lower animals. According to the evolution, people have reptilian brain. When you have fight, flight, or freeze, that's reptilian brain. When we have a cortex well developed in human beings, the cortex has the prefrontal cortex, the one which modulates the activity of amygdala. This is the neural model of emotional regulation. When you have a threat, you have an affective state. Affective state means that you have fear, anxiety, and arousal. The studies show that when you have this affective state and you are able to look in your mind and you are able to say that, this is just my fear, this is just my anger. If you're able to label all of your emotions, you will be able to control those emotions. So when you see emotion shows in the lower part where the amygdala is, then the cortex is the one which regulation is done. You can use your language and yourself, feeling of yourself, who you are, what you think about it. With that, you can reason out and able to control your emotions. This is evidence in the scientific study by Brzezinski-Lewis. Brzezinski-Lewis did the study showing that people who meditate long hours, that means that they compare the people who meditate 10,000 hours, mean about 10 years of continuous meditation, compared with the people who did 40,000 hours. This was done on the Tibetan Buddhist monks. Showed that the activity in amygdala slows down as your experience in meditation increases. There is another finding. If you look at this brain picture, with the hand it exposes a small picture which is called the insula. Insula, according to neuroscience, is almost like a CEO of the brain. This insula have a feeling of what's happening in your body. See, when you get really angry, you'll notice that you might start sweating, you might have tightness on your forehead, you have discomfort in the shoulder, or some chest discomfort. When you really develop intuition, that you know what's happening, you immediately realize that I feel some anger. When you notice that you feel anger, that means you are in charge. When you say that I'm angry, that means you're not really in charge of yourself. So this trains that, these mindfulness trains that you'll be able to notice your emotions. When you notice your emotion, you'll be able to regulate better. So in this, you notice that insula is the place where you have the mindfulness of the body. Then where you notice what is happening in which part of the body and what they are telling you. And also it shows the experience, your anger, fear, disgust, happiness, sadness, love, and pain. And this is the area which is very active, when you practice meditation, mindfulness. You see the people with long-term meditators. This study was done in Harvard by Sarah Lazar. You see the number one is the insula. People in long-term meditation practice of 8 years or more, the gray matter in the insula is much thicker in number one. And then prefrontal cortex is number two. They become very active. But the insula not only changes with mindfulness meditation, it also changes when you learn how to develop empathy. There is a study in Italy showing that there are neurons in us. It's called mirror neurons. That means that suppose you're having pain, I'm looking at you, and my brain is also showing the pain. How did they find? They were doing a study with monkeys. They were giving food to monkeys. The lab technician will come and give food to the monkey, and they're looking at the monkey's brain, which nerve cells are functioning. And then when the monkey get the food, it started changing. Then monkey watched the people who were bringing food, and then those people started eating, and the same changes take place in the monkey when the monkey was not eating. So that means that we have a situation called mirror neurons. Those mirror neurons are present in the insula also. That means when you meditate, not only you're able to control your prefrontal cortex, you're also able to develop empathy. So when we go back to Bhagavad Gita, Shri Krishna describes Satyagna Prajna, which describes that it's one who remains unperturbed in the face of calamity, accepts good or evil with equanimity, and has the ability to keeping his emotion in check. This is a little similar to the description by Salovey, when he had 4 steps of emotional regulation. But when Salovey and Meyer talk, they're talking more about relating your profession and your, exterior life. But when Shri Krishna talk about it, it's all for everything in our life. Then Lord Krishna described that 2 emotional vices, desire and anger. It leads to individuals' downfall. It says that from anger comes delusion, from delusion comes loss of memory, and from loss of memory comes the ruin of power of discrimination. This is exactly shown in my brain picture that I show you where the amygdala becomes very active. The prefrontal cortex never get the message. Amygdala reacts, and it's called amygdala hijack. So in some of the elementary school in this country, when they teach mindfulness, they tell the children when they get angry, before they act, they have to tell somebody else, oh, I have an amygdala hijack. So that's how they're teaching it. Because amygdala is hijacking the whole person. You don't want to do something, you realize that it's wrong, but you get angry, you're out of control. So you do that. It's called amygdala hijack. Then if you study Patanjali Yoga Sutras, emotional regulation is tied to stilling the mind and not identifying with the mental or emotional process. The yogi develops skills derived from yogic practice and wisdom that the practice engenders. Yogi knows what feelings and emotions are present without being lost in them. This is what Patanjali states as yoga, chitta, vritti, nirodha. That's the goal of yoga, is stilling of whirlpools of mind. Actually, why the modern science describes the same whirlpool activity, yoga provides a method to deal with this, where it says that meditation or dhyana in yoga involves bringing awareness at an early stage to the fundamental whirlpools and cascade that occur in our mind, so that we can supervise them and quiet them in the service of nirodha. There are two kinds of emotions. One is called the afflictive emotions, which are the worldly emotions. They're related to the day-to-day activities. They are non-afflictive emotions called healing emotions, which include kindness, maitri, compassion, karuna, joy, wonder, mudita, and then acceptance called upeksha. This is exactly the same thing that Lord Buddha described. He described, it's called Brahma Vihara. If you study mindfulness, they talk about 4 qualities of Brahma Vihara. Exactly the same 4 things that Patanjali Yoga Sutra talks about. Actually, this is a thing that you would be surprised that many of the businesses are practicing this. It's called the compassion practice. So you sit down, what they teach, like, you say the mantra, Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina. Same mantra, if you recite it, which you understand the meaning of it, then you're wishing the whole world to be happy, to be healthy, to be safe. Same thing, this Maitri is doing the same thing. So you'll be surprised to know that a lot of business were very much against teaching compassion. Now many of the very large business in this country are teaching compassion to the people, because compassion helps with the bottom line of the company. And Patanjali also described the raga and dvesha. These two are the kaleshas, which are the one obstruction to our peace of mind. There's a balance between raga and dvesha that initiate the unfolding or cascading of mental events. From these, you notice that you can have secondary emotion like happiness, sadness, anger, irritation, and so on. So in yogic action, there are 3 components, also discipline, self-study, and orientation in Sutra 2.1. So this teaches us, when we practice these components of yoga, proliferating emotional phenomena dwindle and light of understanding can shine forth, illuminating the way to discriminative awareness. Very interesting, the discriminative awareness now is used in the science as equanimity. That means you have the same kind of feeling under any different situations. This is mindfulness also teaching that. This exactly teaching from the Patanjali Yoga Sutra. See, discriminating insight deconstructs all the phenomenal walls, objects and conditions, setting them apart from the pure awareness. See, pure awareness is mindfulness. On top of that, you need equanimity. So that's why when they teach the training of mindfulness, they said there are 2 components. One is being aware. Second component is called developing insight. Then you understand your mind, you notice what is happening to others. And consciousness now oriented to this distinction can gravitate towards kaivalya or liberation. Fully integrate experience that awareness is independent of nature. This is the goal of yoga. So very interesting happening is that in India, there are 3 different groups of teaching going on for emotional intelligence. One is the teaching in S. Vyasa. S. Vyasa is located in Bangalore. They have a program called Management for Excessive Tension, SMET program. They have taken the teaching compared to the emotional intelligence we teach. They have a similar program. And then TM, after mindfulness scientific studies, TM is the second most. It's a mantra meditation. They have hundreds of papers showing that how TM is helpful in different medical conditions. And then in Art of Living is teaching Sudarshan Kriya program. These all are focusing on the same thing, developing emotional intelligence. And I appreciate your attention, and thank you very much for letting me present my studies. Thank you.